comparison's the thief of all joy, right? You look at some organizations that are millions of dollars and having successful capital campaigns and turn around and work with really small nonprofits that are trying to grow and establish themselves. And so we hear a lot of that. So-and-so does this and they raise $500,000 in one night at their event. And the lesson is that's not where they started. If you want to get where they are at some point, then you're not going to get there overnight. Take one step at a time, investing in the right places, which involves I need the knowledge to know where to invest our time, our resources, and our energy, knowing that we'll get there at some point.
Welcome to the How Leaders Think podcast, the show that transforms you by renewing your mind and giving you new ways to think. I am your host, Kenny Lange, and with me today is another Kenny?
What?
It is the Kenny Sigler. He is a partner, founding partner, and genius at Sigler Crist Agency here in Tyler, where I live. He has been helping nonprofits navigate the complex and tricky world of fundraising. Boy, is it tricky. For nearly 15 years. That's, 75 years in nonprofit world. It's like dog years. He helps organizations create clear fundraising goals and action plans based on his experience working in the field and monitoring trends in charitable giving. Welcome to the show, Kenny.
Thanks for having me, Kenny. First time caller, long time listener.
Hey, that's what I like to hear. Smash that like and subscribe button.
Got it.
I do think time may fold in on itself during the conversation, just with two Kennys and the technology. I don't understand all the physics behind it, but it could happen. So I hope this episode sees the light of day, or at least makes it into the time capsule for the year 3000.
Yeah, and you didn't miss another fascinating part in that we also are both married to Rebeccas who go by Becca. So we can add another layer to that.
And just to clear up, in case anybody lost the S on the end of that, he said we're both married to Rebeccas. Plural, not a singular. This is not some sort of, I don't know what the reverse of polygamy. I think there's a different word for it. And if we were, we would probably have our own show on TLC, would be my guess, or Discovery.
That's true. I appreciate the clarification there.
Yeah, I just making it. I have a degree in communication, and clarifying really minute details that are often meaningless is really a top skill for me. Go UT Tyler. Tell me today, Kenny, what is on your mind?
Yeah, thanks, Kenny. That's going to get weird to hear, I'm sure. Hey, Kenny. Thanks, Kenny. What's on my mind is you mentioned that we are in the nonprofit fundraising and marketing space. That's where we specialize in. And in the summer, Giving USA comes out with an annual report on philanthropy that measures charitable giving in the United States. And so in looking at the 2025 report, we're looking at these big figures, and we're looking at these trends in philanthropy. And we're like, in 2024, $592 billion was given to nonprofits. So we're talking big numbers and big trends that span decades. And what's actually on my mind, Kenny, I think that you can relate to working with leaders as you do, is not actually anything directly fundraising related, but how do we take these big reports that are looking at things that aren't even at a 30,000 foot view, but like 100,000 foot view, and we're looking at these reports and these trends, and we're looking at numbers like 592 billion. How do we take big reports like that and translate that information into things that we can use for our organizations, whether you're a business or whether you're a nonprofit? I think that we all have a desire, or most people have a desire and an eagerness to learn and grow, be on the forefront of what's going on in their field. But I find that a lot of people struggle with taking some of that big information and trying to translate it or put it into actionable items that they can use.
Yeah, that's so true. And even with the other half of your partnership with Mr. Brandon Crist with the marketing side, and that's where he and I have a connection, is marketing also comes out with all these big numbers and these big reports. And my personal experience on that side was there are all these great big reports. There's data. Data is everywhere. We don't lack for data. I think we spent the last 25 years creating, some people would say that we've created more information and data in probably like the last 15, 20 years than was created in the 2,000 years prior. which is insane. It's easy to say, but insane to really like fathom.
It
But
is. And when I got into fundraising, finding information about fundraising specifically wasn't always easy. You had
hmm,
to, anytime a book or an article came out, there were a few trusted sources. And when something came out, us in the field, like we were just eager to read it and digest it and talk about it. And it wasn't always the best information, but new was exciting, right? And to your point, in a relatively short amount of time, we now have all the information we could possibly want at our fingertips.
hmm,
And then now with AI, you can ask it any question and it's going to pull even more information. And
right.
so, those are two different things. So one is how to make your way through the noise of marketing and fundraising and business and leadership. To my original point, right? How do you take all that information and see those
Hmm.
big figures? And how do leaders take that and drill it down into something that they can use and that they can help their team implement?
Anytime people bring up like, hey, I'm spotting this, I'm noticing this, but be it entrepreneurs, thought leaders, things like that, it usually means there's something missing. So you bring up so I guess my question would be, you're noticing this. So what is the current thinking, the prevailing wisdom that makes what you're suggesting so difficult for nonprofit leaders translating some of those things? What is the story they're telling themselves that keeps them from being able to do that simply, quickly, easily, whatever you would describe it as?
The challenge is that it's not helpful to dive into that information. If it's not serving me now, then I don't have the time to read about it. I don't have the time to try to understand it and to think at some point in the future, how is this going to position our organization for success in the long term? You know, nonprofits really struggle with being short-sighted and just focusing on what do we have to do today? What's coming up next week? What event do we have coming up next month?
Yeah.
And when you're in that cycle and you're in that churn, then when you're presented with, let's just say it's really good information like the Giving USA report that looks at fundraising and philanthropy at a really high level, your tendency is to go, that might be great, but I don't have the time to think about that. And I just don't really understand how that great big information is going to help our nonprofit in the next month or so.
Gotcha. It's not contextualized to their situation. They don't see themselves in that report. And there may be so much that I don't even know where it's. People can make reports that the more complicated they seem, the smarter it seems, which I think that's like the Microsoft approach to computers. Make them more complex so it seems smart. And that's my first dig at Microsoft. We'll see if I can get in some more. But if I can't see myself in this, then it's not going to occupy my mind because I'm having to burn too many mental calories trying to figure this out and piece it together. And what does this mean for me, especially if I'm in that sub-million, maybe sub $5 million range when you're talking about things in the billions? You may go, yeah, that's not me. I'm going to keep going, even if it would be helpful to you to notice these things and apply them in, say, your strategic planning or quarterly planning. But because you can't get there quickly, they're passing it. So it sounds like there's a both and. Is one, understanding the value that something like that would bring to the nonprofits, and then the report makers, generators, reporters, I don't know,
The researchers.
researchers, yes, in the lab coats, that there probably is some burden on them to make it more accessible. But I think what we're talking about is what part can those nonprofit leaders play in digesting, dissecting this so that they benefit, that they grow and see beyond their nose.
I think of a couple of things with that. One is not that long ago, I wrote a blog. I think the title was something like, does your fundraising feel like it's stuck on dial up or using dial up speed?
Yeah.
And the theme of that blog was about looking at AOL. Some of us can remember AOL. And AOL was the biggest thing in internet. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
you couldn't get bigger than AOL during the early days of the internet. And when you look at the decline of AOL, you look at an organization, a company that was really successful doing some things And there were some
Mm-hmm.
people within AOL that could look further ahead and see the trends and see the direction that the internet was going and how accessible it would be at some point in the future. Where back then, AOL, you had a monthly subscription and you paid by the minute. And we all, or
Get
a
your
lot of us
floppy
remember the
disk
CDs.
and yeah.
And some people at AOL could see the future, they could look ahead, but many people couldn't. And they were just in that churn of, hey, this doesn't apply to us. We're just still going to do our thing. And it doesn't happen overnight. You don't become outdated overnight. You don't wake up one
Right.
morning. It doesn't happen in the span of a week. You don't go from being running on all cylinders to all of a sudden being outdated. It's a slow decline that eventually you look up one day and you're like, wow, we're really far behind. We're using outdated systems and technology, or we're targeting this audience that is now a smaller slice of the pie than this other one. That those big reports are helpful because if you just constantly neglect those trends,
Mm-hmm.
then over time it is just a small decline, and eventually we'll look up and go, oh, we're using things that are really outdated.
Right. And that it's I like what you said is it's a long slow decline. I think that's where it sneaks up on people. It's like the frog in the pot of water that's slowly turned up to boiling, right? Like you're totally unaware until you're being cooked. And that's a rude awakening, and it always feels like the stakes um are higher with nonprofits. I don't know that they necessarily always are, but at least for those who are in leadership, and especially those who are founder, have the passion, the drive to start something, you're driven by a need in society or your community or both. And in my opinion, I was like that almost demands the highest amount of vision and vigilance, because you're not just out to serve a customer, which believe me, you and I both run for-profit businesses. We live to serve our customers and help them do good and do well, and we also have families to feed. But it's always interesting to me that people in the leaders in nonprofit space almost feel like it comes across this way to me, so I don't want to make this sound like an indictment, is that we are going to succeed based on the nobility of our cause.
Right.
Therefore, we don't need to do this. This is somehow corporate. We're selling out. We don't care about people. If we start talking about, hey, what are the giving trends over the last couple of years in Texas? And then I do want you to talk about in East Texas, like just further contextualizing like the areas in which I operate in. What does matter to the people around here? Because you could be fishing in the wrong pond, if I wanted to sound really southern, and I'm gonna have to live with that, and we're gonna leave that in the show. But
You're right. A lot of
yeah,
people get into nonprofits because of their heart. They find a cause that they care deeply about, or they get into a role that they feel the impact of what they're doing. And a lot of people in fundraising, they lead with their hearts. And when you start talking about data and systems and research, there's no heart in that.
it's cold.
It's cold. That's not why I got into this. And when people are thinking about how to build relationships with the donors, and there's an art to that, obviously relational. And you might think, I don't need data and research in order to have a effective conversation with a donor. That doesn't come into play. And when you look at it on a case by case basis, it is hard to see how, okay, in this situation, that's not going to be helpful. And in this situation, that's not going to be helpful. But again, you have to take a step back. And one of the reasons why there's so much burnout in the nonprofit sector is because that is the prevailing thought. And a lot of nonprofits have that culture of, okay, just grind and grind. Let's think one week to the next. And that can wear you out when you're just on a weekly basis and you're not taking time to step back. Remember the impact that your organization is trying to make, get all the feels, and then also make sure that you're being prudent to look at where you're going and what steps you need to take in order to make this a long-term successful organization. Which I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on this, Kenny, because as fundraisers, that's the challenge. How do we take time to take a step back and look at the bigger picture and actually do some strategic planning or some visioning, or just look out further than a week when you know that you have all of these things, all these tasks that need to get done. That's the biggest challenges, and why there's a lot of turnover in development specifically, is that long task list that you're constantly trying to work your way through. It's never ending. As long as you focus on that, you'll just keep moving on to the next task. And how do you carve out some time aside to do the higher level work?
That's a great question. And truth be told, that's a battle regardless of your tax status, for profit, nonprofit. Nonprofits, sometimes when I'm trying to schedule a strategic planning or annual planning or quarterly planning meeting, we got all this, we got to help people. I was like, yeah, like I get that, but they're going to be there when you get back. I do think, part of it is coming to terms with the fact that as long as you're doing the right things and you're growing, or really like just an operation, there will always be fires. As a leader, your job is to determine which fires get my attention and in what order, and make peace with the fact that they're never going to go out completely. And truth be told, as soon as you grow again, you've got new fires, right? Mm-hmm. It's in the way that I look at a lot of leadership, it's in a flywheel. Like as soon as you start improving, I always teach people that you got to start from a place of awareness. You got to live in reality. As a matter of fact, I was just talking with a team recently, and it was a nonprofit, and I told them, I was like, look, y'all have some beautiful vision for the future, but you cannot build a solid plan on vision. You have to build it on reality. You can build towards a vision, but you can't build on a vision.
Right.
And so trying to tell them, like, the fires will still be there, but you're never going to rise above them unless you take this time away. And that's where getting into a rhythm of it, some people do like, we do strategic planning every 3 years. And I'm like, yeah, how's that working out? I turn into Dr. Phil. How is that working out for you? We'll be right back. But telling them, no, you need to be meeting once a quarter, even if it's just like you and another leader in the organization. Could be the board chair, could be depending on your size and sophistication and where you are in your growth cycle. But get real. Where are we? Where do we want to end up? What do we need to do next? What's the next right thing? And when you get into a rhythm of it, then the rhythm takes over, and it no longer feels like pushing a boulder uphill by yourself. You start to feel like we do this, and then we do this, and then we do this, and then we do this. And it's like, you ever gone running or cycling or something like that, and like you've been out for a while, and you're like, I'm just going to let my mind wander and let my legs take over, and my body can just act on its own. It's a little like that, but it really does help. And when you start building momentum, it's addictive. Just like I'm sure, if I've struggled with fundraising for forever and, I'm working with someone like you and I start getting campaigns and I'm like, oh my gosh, we've been trying to do this for years and now we do this. And now we start to build like a campaign cycle that people come to know and expect and connect with because they understand the story and what that does. And this is actually, it's effective and efficient. Dear God, where have you been all my life? And all I'm saying is, if you find someone named Kenny, they're going to help you. That's all I'm getting at here.
Yeah, I've always found that to be true.
Yeah.
And 100% accurate. There's another thing that what you're saying is also has to deal with confidence. And there's a lot of people that work in nonprofits that struggle with confidence, because they may be an executive director role. And so this concept of working with a board that they have to report up to, and it's a group of people, and they're also trying to lead a team, and there might be fundraisers on that team, or you might be a development director, and might be new to you. Maybe the organization's new, but a lot of people are everywhere, for-profits and nonprofits, struggle with confidence, right? What we see in the nonprofit space is real lacking of confidence in fundraising. And part of that is because we don't know our craft, we don't know our profession really well. Again, when we get in that cycle and we're just doing we're moving from event to event, and now we have a newsletter to write and send out and all these things, what we don't do is we don't hone our craft. we don't become experts in the field of fundraising. And make no mistake, fundraising is a profession. It's the profession that everyone thinks that they can do. You don't ever go to the doctor's office or your accountant and be like, okay, I know you said that we should probably do this, but let me tell you what I think we should do. You take their advice and
Yeah.
their counsel. In fundraising, everybody has an opinion on it, and everybody thinks that they can do it pretty well. And what happens for those of us that are actually in the nonprofit world and we're doing the work, we understand that there is an art and a science to what we do. If you're not paying attention to it, if you're not studying it, you're
Mhm.
just in the weeds every day, then you don't build up the expertise and the knowledge base. I think a consequence of that is you don't ever gain the confidence to lead your team well. So one of the
Yeah.
benefits of of studying these big numbers that we talked about at the beginning, one of the benefits of reading up on these billion-dollar figures and these
Mhm.
trends that are happening for decades, even if you don't learn it for your organization, if you don't apply it in a very tangible way, the confidence that you get in learning from research or learning is you're able to lead your team better. If you have a committee, a development committee for your
Right.
nonprofit, you have to position yourself to lead them well. And when you're constantly just deferring to everyone and you're just the note taker and you're just reacting to everything that they're saying,
Yeah.
then it becomes really hard. And so I think you mentioned, you talked about momentum. I think it's a great point. Once you start building your confidence,
Mhm.
you're learning and studying the research. I think it's hard to quantify, but that confidence that you get in studying your work translates into really positive leadership for your organization.
100%. I'm glad you're saying this because this happens on the for-profit world where you have the founder is as they're vacating seats and hiring. Sales and sometimes marketing are the last seats. Like they know it really well. So I'd be curious what you've seen in terms of founders starting to acknowledge that they need help. But I'm curious, as a craft, do people just think folks are going to give because of the passion with which they talk about their mission and their cause? Is it because, oh, I don't see anything technical. It's just sharing about who we are, and that's easy because I can talk, right? So just because you can do the activity doesn't mean you can actually do it right. It's if I gave my 3.5-year-old a hammer, that doesn't suddenly mean he can go outside and build a deck. He could swing it. He's probably going to break something. And if you feel like that 3-year-old, then admitting it is the first step.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, where are people getting hung up? And also, I love what you say about preparation. Or you didn't say preparation, but the studying and the confidence. I saw a quote. I'd be curious of your take on this from a guy. He writes about business and marketing, sales, leadership, and things like that. His name is Alex Hermosi, and he said like nervousness or anxiety, especially about something, like a lack of confidence, usually comes because you haven't prepared enough. And he goes, confidence comes from preparing so well that it's unreasonable that you would fail.
Yeah. I love the quote. And I'll tell you a little secret too. This is just between us, right?
Yeah, me and the YouTube.
You're not recording this or anything, I don't think.
I wouldn't even know how.
I'll tell you that we don't always, when we're working with a client and whatever it is they're struggling with, nonprofit leadership, marketing, fundraising, we don't always have all the answers when they walk in our door. Just a little tip there. There are so many different situations that we can't possibly have all the answers before you walk in the door. So there's this feeling, this expectation that we always struggle with, and I'm sure you do in your world as well. There's like this pressure to have all the answers all the time. And as soon as someone says, hey, I need help with this, you feel this pressure that I need to have the answer right away. And
Mm-hmm.
honestly, I've certainly felt that before. Even when I was a fundraiser myself in the nonprofit space, I always felt like every donor that asked a question, I needed to have an answer. I needed to be the expert.
Yeah.
And right, one thing that I learned is that the more that I studied and the more I prepared myself, then I didn't feel the pressure to have all the answers all the time, but I was able to have enough confidence that when a new situation arises, I can go, okay, Let me take some time to think about this. Let me think about my own experience. Let me
Mm-hmm.
think about what I know is happening in the landscape of philanthropy and nonprofits. And now let's think about how we can use that to solve this problem. Let's think about
Yeah.
how we can use that to plan out what's going to happen over the next year. And then we can do that together versus if I wasn't prepared, if I don't study my field, then you're going to have this, maybe it's like an insecurity. If you're not prepared, that you
Right.
feel this pressure to deliver and that doesn't come up with the best outcomes. So to solve problems under that type of pressure and you add this element of insecurity in it, where I feel like I have to have all the answers,
Mm.
then you're thinking about yourself. You're not thinking about solving the problem. You're thinking about how do I look in this situation, not how are we solving the problem together. So when you do the preparation and you have the confidence and you have the experience, then you can be more focused on solving the problem, less about how do I look in the problem solving process. And then to not even to fundraisers working with development committees, executive directors working with boards,
Right.
a lot of people get hung up on I have to be the expert and there's all that pressure that comes along with it. Some of the best nonprofit leaders that I know are experts in their field, not only whether it's marketing, fundraising, human resources, finance, a lot
Mhm.
of good executive directors that come from the finance field, but it's also mission specific expertise that they bring. I completely agree 100% with that quote.
I I love that. And I think everybody should rewind and listen to that again. That if you're trying to answer questions and you mix in insecurity, now you're more concerned with how you look than the other person. Um, that's a sobering reality to live in, especially when you do feel the pressure that I should have all the answers. Especially if you're founder, you're executive director, or CEO, or whatever. You have maybe a high level title. And usually you got there by having a lot of answers, but then it's almost like the more you know, the more you realize you don't know. Like I was a brilliant parent before I had kids.
Yeah.
And then my kids were like, "We didn't read those books you looked at." And I'm like, oh, "Dang it." And then it's like, "Becca," like my Becca, not yours, because that'd been
Okay.
weird.
Yeah.
I'm assuming she knows quite a lot about child rearing, but maybe both of them. They should have their own show on
They
like
should have their own
motherhood
podcast.
and wisdom and things like that. I've actually tried to
Yeah.
get my wife to do that, but she's an extreme introvert.
Yeah. Same here. My, mine is as well. There we go.
That makes me think
They have
we
more in
ever tried
common.
to go like on a double date. It would actually just be you and me eating, and they wouldn't even come. They're like, "No, thanks. I'm not. I don't want to go out." Just a
Yeah.
cardboard cutout. As I'm thinking through this, if we went back to how does all this come back around to? I'm looking at the data. What are some of those big mistakes besides just blowing it off and saying this doesn't apply to me? I don't know why people talk in that voice, but they do. What are some of those like two or three key things they are missing out on that if they would just slow down, take a little bit of time, that it could possibly unlock something for them?
Yeah. I think there are a lot of misconceptions about nonprofits and fundraising in general. So let's use fundraising as an example. If you're listening, you're in another field, this is certainly applicable. But if we're
Mm-hmm.
looking at fundraising specific, there are a lot of misconceptions out there. Let's say, for one, there's this misconception that direct mail is dead, that snail mail is for the birds, as they say. It's just for
Mm-hmm.
um, people, primarily older donors who may still give by checks, and that's just dwindling. So
Gold
you may
bricks.
that's a common misconception, right? However, if you look at the research and you look at what's happening nationally, you would know that it is still a great investment to make if you're fundraising. And so you're missing out. You're leaving money on the table if you're not doing direct mail to raise money. So one, you identify misconceptions. If you're not reading the information, you're operating under a premise that is completely false, and you have no way of knowing that. Uh, Taking that a step further, if you know that information, if direct mail is a good vehicle for charitable giving, and you try to do some direct mail, or let's say it doesn't quite work the way that you had hoped, that's a good strategy, that's a good vehicle. And so the question that you're asking isn't, is direct mail worth it? The question is, what did I do with my direct mail that didn't solicit a response? You're
Mm.
asking the right question. And what I've seen a lot of organizations do, just using this as an example, is go, we tried direct mail, it didn't work. And so we're not going to do it again. But if they had the knowledge, if they had studied the trends, they would know
Mhm.
that's actually a good way to raise money. But the question ought to be, what did we try? And what can we learn about the best practices in direct mail that we missed those and then try again? So you learn to ask the right questions, and you tend to operate with a lot of misconceptions if you're not studying the research.
Gotcha, because it could clear up some things that maybe could cost you thousands or and months of time or weeks of time, and just being a little more informed and asking a better question could be that pivot point between a wildly successful capital campaign versus one that isn't quite so much. Um, there was I heard this on a podcast, and it was really helpful to me because I do also, if you're in a coach or consultant space, just like you were saying, I sometimes feel the same pressure. A client asks me a question, it's like, dang it, Kenny, you're supposed to know everything, which, the only person who's feeling that way is me. My clients don't actually think that about
It
me.
isn't it isn't it funny? No one ever says or thinks that, but we
Yeah.
have that fear that's what's going to happen.
Who said that to you? The little person inside my head. But it was, if you reframe, you can reframe things in a way that's a more positive and like development. And I'm using development not in a like fundraising sense, but in a just a progressive like learning sense. Instead of direct mail doesn't work, say, I don't know how to make direct mail work for me or my organization. Now it's just a skill gap. You just have to
Mm.
go learn it, just like you didn't know how to tie your shoes before you learned how. You didn't know how to file the paperwork for a nonprofit, but now you do, right? Now it's a skill gap, not an indictment on your competence. And I thought that little flip was really helpful because it was like, oh, it lets me off. I can let me off the hook. I don't yet know how to make that work just yet. And I got a billion things like that, but it makes it a little bit more, oh, I can stay curious about this now. And maybe I do need to get a coach or a consultant like Kenny Sigler to come help. And that, because I'm closing my skill gap, and that would help me do it fast. Or maybe there's a program I've been invited into and I could participate in something like, or join like AFP, right? Like they meet every month. I could go and I could learn from other peers. There's 100 different ways you could go about it. But if it's a skill gap, now it says nothing about who you are as a person or your value as a leader. It just means, hey, I didn't really study this, but now I'm figuring out it's just like Kenny said, it's a craft. There's an art and a science. It behooves me. I don't get to use that word as much as I'd like.
It's on my bingo card for words in this, and I just done.
Dude, yeah, come forward. We'll check your card, make sure you hit all the right ones. So
You can almost use that skill gap. Like if you needed an extra layer, you can
Mhm.
always use that. I just learned this. I just read this new blog article research
Mhm.
that now tells me that this is where we're going. So if you even needed an extra layer of security, you can say, hey, it's not that I failed to study and so I don't have the skill gap, but
Yeah.
trends are heading in this way. And so to be proactive, we need to grow our skill set in this area.
Gotcha. Yeah, you may say, "Oh, we just went to a Ranger game this weekend." And when you're starting out, you may say, and I know like either you coach or your kids are in T-ball or something like that. But when they're just learning to swing, your expectation in T-ball is not that they're hitting home runs. It's that they connect with the ball, right? At least the first time. And then it's okay, now you got that. So it could be the same thing running a new campaign, or you looked at a trend and you tried something is, well, my goal wasn't to hit a home run. My goal was to get on base or just connect with the ball and pray that whoever's throwing it doesn't hit me in the head, which would be my constant fear if I actually played baseball. But
Yeah, that's hard. It's hard not to. It feels like settling for a single.
yeah.
And you make a good point. Comparison's the thief of all joy, right?
Yeah.
And so you look at some organizations that are raising millions of dollars and having successful capital campaigns. And we're blessed enough to work on some of those campaigns and at the same time turn around and work with really small nonprofits that are trying to grow and establish themselves. And so we hear a lot of that. If we can only do that, so and so does this and they raise $500,000 in
Yeah.
one night at their event. And the lesson is that's not where they started. They've
Everybody
been doing
started with
that
zero,
for,
right?
yeah, they've been doing that for 20 years. You started 3 years ago. And so
Mm-hmm.
instead of trying to hit that home run tomorrow, like, well, this may not be the most appealing thing in the world to start building some of these systems now,
Yeah.
because I hard to see how these systems help us raise money. Again, look a little bit further out. If you want to get to where they are at some point, then you're not going to get there overnight. And to take one step at a time, investing in the right places, which involves I need the knowledge to know where to invest our time, our resources, and our energy, and knowing that we'll get there at some point.
Yeah.
I think the last thing that you probably have some thoughts on it. Sometimes it's just hard to think that way because we're all humans and we're just thinking about our own time frame.
Right.
And when I think about I'm working for a nonprofit at whatever level, and I'm going to do something that might benefit the organization in 10 years,
Mm-hmm.
I don't see myself at that nonprofit in 10 years, which the average time that a development director is in a position is 2 years, maybe less at this point.
Jeez.
Why would you? We're human. We know that we have our own goals and we know that we have expectations that are set on us. And a lot of that is how much money did we raise this year? And so spending time that'll benefit the organization beyond when I see myself at the organization, that can be hard.
Yeah. Yeah, especially in a nonprofit, because you're like, I'm here for the mission, not for the job. And I view your employment through some lens of loyalty. And not that I'm against that. I always wanted that from my employees, that there's a mutual loyalty. But seeing, I would go back to what you said about seeing what you're doing as a craft. And you just happen to be plying your craft in this organization at this time for this season for however long that lasts. But no, it's rare that anybody stays somewhere forever. Now, I would love for you to mention the report that y'all just produced and came out that was specific to East Texas, and then talk what's a first step someone can take if they say, you know what, I do need to research, I need to smarten up a little bit, I want to sharpen the saw. If you're a Stephen Covey fan, what's the first step someone could do in the next 24 hours, spending little to no money to make progress towards that, to hit that single as opposed to go for the home run right out of the gate?
Yeah. So the local fundraising report that you mentioned, we try to practice what we preach, and we're not perfect,
Mm-hmm.
but we do have the experience, and we know the value of planning ahead and being very strategic
Mm-hmm.
with what we're doing and trying to forecast out where we want to be in the future. And when we started the company, we knew that we didn't want to be a widget factory. We didn't just want
Yeah.
to be in the commodity business where we're just cranking out just a bunch of stuff without knowing where we're going, because we
Mm-hmm.
see that as a problem, especially in the nonprofit space. Just that short-sighted, we just need to crank out all this stuff. And so we wanted to help businesses and nonprofits think more strategically about where they're going, where they want to be, so that we know what the vision is and what success looks like. And then we know how to get there and not
Yeah.
waste time, money, resources going off in different directions. So when we started, that's what we knew that we wanted to do, is be in that strategy space. And we knew that we needed good data. And so we were looking at all this national data that we knew and that we look at on a regular basis. And we found that there wasn't a local survey. We didn't have good local fundraising data here
Hmm.
in East Texas. And we ran into that challenge. We kept hearing this is what all these national numbers are, but that's not us. That ain't me. We're just this nonprofit that's raising $1 million. We're not raising multi-millions, tens,
Yeah.
hundreds of millions. That ain't me. And I knew from my experience that it is you. Yeah, this report, you're seeing these same things. And the things that you're reading in articles, no matter where that article is, Washington, New York, California,
Right.
it is you. And so a couple of years ago, we did the first fundraising report specific to East Texas. We did our second this year in 2025. And we were able to uncover real specific challenges that nonprofits face.
Mm-hmm.
And so there are some differences between nonprofits here in East Texas and nationally. But we did find that, yeah, a lot of the same things that nonprofits face on a national scale, nonprofits here struggle with. And so it added some validity to, oh, okay, in some ways we are unique, and every
Mm-hmm.
community thinks they're unique, and they are. So we learn what makes our region unique, and we know that, yes, we are also in this same landscape together, and we do see some of the same trends locally that we are seeing nationally.
Hmm.
And so it adds that layer of, okay, credibility and trust. And for us, that's key. For our company's vision, we want to be on the forefront and staying on top of the trends and the data so that we can help our clients do that,
Right.
so that they're not having to spend as much time going through all that. So we to bring that to them. So that's what we did. And we've done 2 years. We'll keep doing it, because as we do each year, we'll be able to compare a year-over-year analysis. And so that's
Yeah,
been
that'll be
fascinating
cool.
and well received. We hear regularly that nonprofits are looking at the data and helping it, allowing it to inform their decision-making process. That's probably the best compliment that we can get is, hey, we did this thing, we downloaded the report, and it helped. We were able to use that information to make this decision. That's like
Yeah.
the best
Oh,
compliment we can get.
that's huge. If
Yeah.
somebody wanted that report, where would they go to get it? And we'll link it up.
It's Yep, it's on our website, siglercrist.com. We have a resources tab in the menu, and you click that. There's a drop down for the 2025 East Texas Fundraising Survey.
Gotcha. Because I know there's some fellow East Texans that'll listen to this, but if you're in a different market, that may give you an inspiration of how could you do something similar and start to contextualize the data for yourself in your market and maybe for others like you. Because I mean, everybody's on the same side of the table here, even if you are competing for some dollars, but we're all just trying to do good.
Yeah, we can do the same analysis for whatever community that needs it, to say, okay, we need to know on
Yeah.
a more granular level what's happening within our philanthropic community.
Yeah. That would be
Yep.
excellent. Somebody who says, okay, yeah, you sold me. I want to close these skill gaps. I really want to take this seriously as a craft, not just as a cause. What's something in the next 24 hours they can do spending little to no money to close that gap?
Yeah, so I mentioned the Giving USA report at the top. They do have a free infographic that you can download. If you go to Giving USA, go to their website. The primary infographic is a free download that you can get, so that you can pretty quickly get some really good information, some statistics that'll help you start to build that knowledge base. You'll be able to impress some people by saying, well, I know that in 2024,
Yeah.
$592.5 billion was given to nonprofits. And then you can know how much of that, what percentage of that came from individuals, foundations, corporations, and through bequests. So just within that little infographic, you can get some really good information. And then you can look at your own donor base and your own activities and go, okay, if we know that, let's say 70% of giving comes from individuals, and we're spending 90% of our time going after businesses for sponsorships, we probably need to adjust or refocus where we're spending our time. So that's a good first step. Download the infographic, start studying that. And then this might be a plug, but we have a newsletter that comes out at least once a month. And we tried to just be helpful. I mentioned the AOL blog from earlier. There's a lot of information out there. And then we just try to be a free resource that if you're trying to figure out where do I go to get all information, we look at all that. We look at the
Mm-hmm.
Giving USA report. We're reading blogs. We're taking our own client experiences and putting that into real bite-sized blogs
Hmm.
so that you can start to learn new information and also spark a new way of thinking about a particular topic.
Excellent. Yeah, that sounds like a free, easy way to start getting a leg up and making some progress. Kenny, if people want to know more about you and the agency and what y'all are doing, or maybe they have some follow-up questions about some of the resources you mentioned, what's the best way to connect with you, find out more about y'all's work?
Yeah, just it's as simple as go to the website, siglercrist.com, and you'll see a button on there. to schedule a chat, we found the best way to get to know people is by talking to them, either in person or face to face like this, Kenny. How
That's
about that?
real. That's real modern. So I don't know if
Hey,
everybody's ready. I feel more comfortable chatting with AI. Lack of humanity.
that
That's
is fun. That can be fun, and it certainly has its place.
yeah.
We haven't quite figured out how to manifest ourselves into AI yet, so that you can chat with us without knowing you're chatting with us. But that'll come at some point. But until
Yeah.
then, the best way is just to schedule the button, and then we'll
Yeah.
hop on a call and we'll talk to you and figure out what's going on, and we can start that relationship.
That would be great. And we're going to link up all of that. And that's siglercrist.com. Check them out wherever fine websites are made. But thank you so much for spending some time with me and dropping some knowledge. It's always refreshing. I always learn something and usually end up with a quote that I can go and pretend was mine. Be like, Kenny said. And they're like, you? And I'm like, yeah, me. That's who
Oh,
said this.
tricky. Oh, tricky. See, I
Tricky.
see what you're doing there.
Attribution doesn't even matter anymore. We're in a post-attribution world. But I do really
I
appreciate it.
just need to change. I'll just start going by Kenneth now. I'll just use the real name, and I'll just thwart your little plan there.
Yeah, which if anybody ever calls me that, I just assume I'm in trouble or you're an illegal entity of some sort. But
Yeah,
so
having me.
yeah, absolutely. I'm sure it will not be the last time. We'll have plenty to talk about in the future, especially as things continue to evolve. Because as you said, fundraising, development, all of that, it's a craft, and there's new things on the horizon that will need to be tackled. To the listener, thank you so much for spending part of your day with the two Kennys here. If you made it this far, I sincerely hope that you walked away with several gold nuggets, because Lord knows there were plenty of them to be had, and that you take action. If you like things like this, number one, like, rate, review, subscribe, whatever the right button is on your platform of choice. Make sure you don't miss any more of these conversations. It's also a free and easy way for you to help other fellow leaders on their journey. Your engagement helps the algorithms pick this up and put it in front of more people like you who could benefit from it. If you would like more things like this, then you can also subscribe to the Scale Weekly newsletter. It comes out every Tuesday morning. It took me a second to think about that. And it can be read in 60 seconds or less. It's hyper practical and will give you some really actionable tips. So if that's what you're looking for, that's the place to find it at kennylange.com/scale-weekly. Easy words to spell. If you can't spell them, you might not be in my demographic. And that's okay. There's grace for that. But until next time, change the way you think. You'll change the way you lead. We'll see ya.